thought maybe we would start with maybe how that event came to be,
Okay.
Your recollection of it, and then move towards how your institute got established and what you hope to do from there.
Yeah. So, as you know, I have a background in Iranian-American relations. I studied at University of Virginia. I got my PhD from University of Virginia. And as an Iranian, I was privileged to be one of the few Thomas Jefferson Fellows. So I was kind of blessed to attend an institution in this country, higher education, that paid a lot of attention to the importance of history, dialogue, civic engagement. And I guess by that choice, I had a mentor who was an Iranian, has passed away, a professor. And when I went to University of Virginia in 1984, it was right, as you know, in the middle of the tensions between the US and Iran. And I was kind of very much in pain of acknowledging my Iranian nationality and finding a role for myself as a citizen. And I would say that the lesson that I learned from my education at University of Virginia was that I understood the difference between nationality and citizenship. I understood the difference that by your nationality, you don't need to give up how you define your citizenship. So I can be comfortable by calling myself American Iranian or Iranian American and use the pronoun we. And by we, I mean Americans. And once I made that transition, I felt by far more at ease in terms of understanding American-Iranian relations. So starting with my education, I kind of made the transition to becoming first as an Iranian-American, becoming an American Iranian. And then I was a professor at American University in Washington. I taught for many years. Then I went to Egypt. I taught at American University in Cairo. While I was in Egypt, I was really shocked at how Iranians were perceived in the Middle East, and the tension between the two really bothered me in terms of being both of Muslim culture, Muslim background, regional solidarity. And until I saw an Iranian athlete in Egypt. An Iranian weightlifter came to Cairo in 1999, and nobody promoted him. There was no Iranian embassy, and American embassy actually contacted me and said, Bahman, I think you'd be interested to know there's an Iranian athlete here competing for the Cairo championships on weightlifting. We don't have many Iranians here. Why don't you come to the gathering? I think he will like it. So that's how my connections with the sport started. I went to that gathering, and I saw the pleasure on the face of that Iranian athlete when he saw an Iranian. And so it kind of left me with the impression that we Iranians have so many different bonds, and how through conflict we could keep those friendship and bonds. And sports came to my idea. And sports came to me. So when I got back to the US in 2002, I was teaching at University of Maine. I had a program called International Affairs Program. I was the head of it. I kind of got contacted by USA Wrestling. And USA Wrestling had heard about my contact in Cairo and said, Bahman, we have an Iranian wrestling team who's coming to Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, for a World Cup. They have never been here.
Wow.
And we are so grateful to Khatami to allow this. We are really worried about how we're going to treat them in Tennessee. Would you mind flying over and getting to know? So my connection with the wrestling started in 2002 in Tennessee. And from then until we met, which was in 2015-16, Iranian wrestlers had been to America 10 times.
Wow.
You actually saw them on their 11th or 12th visit.
No, and I would see them from a distance online or, but I said, wow, how cool is that?
How cool is that?
Yeah,
so,
that's how I felt.
So it was a relationship that started like that. I always say personal contacts, like the way you came there with your son. I'm sure it had an indelible impact on your son.
Oh, yes, yeah.
It starts with that contact. And then with the wrestlings, we brought the Iranian wrestlers to America for many years, arranged for American wrestling team to go to Iran in 2014. I went to Iran myself with them.
Yeah.
And Iranian wrestlers and American wrestlers had an amazing time because they were shocked how Iranians were inside Iran.
Yeah.
They were not ready for that.
Yeah.
And when they come here, Iranians are shocked how Iranians support them. They were not ready for that.
Yeah.
So we call those shock therapies.
Yeah.
It is called shock therapies.
Yeah.
So we created these ambassadors of goodwill going back and forth. And so finally, unfortunately, because of the Trump travel ban, which was fortunately lifted, the travel ban blocked all the sporting engagement in 2017. We were planning to bring the American wrestlers and Iranian wrestlers together in Iowa for University of Iowa championships, and that got blocked. And then that ambassadorship that we built with Americans went to Iran. They said, if they cannot come here, we go to Iran.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they loved it. Jordan Boros and everything put Instagrams on saying we are with the Iranian people. Yeah. So we created a fantastic network, and we still have it. Yeah. And we realized that political relations can always create problems for these bonds of friendship. We call it bonds of friendships. Yeah. We called it the bonds of friendship through sports. Yeah. And then we decided that we need a structure to strengthen the bonds of friendship. The same people who supported the sports, Iranians and Americans, we came together about 2 years ago and created a Baskerville Institute. And we named an institute after an American missionary who went to Iran in 1909 and got caught up in the constitutional revolution of Iran and fought with the constitutionalists in Iran, Howard Baskerville, and died.
Oh my God.
He's buried in Tabriz.
Oh my God.
And so we came up with a model of friendship. We said the model of friendship is that it is okay to get caught up in each other's political events. But we should not lose sight of the friendship. So once this happened, people did not go destroy the Baskerville's grave. Baskerville is today one of the most popular Americans in Iran. And here, when all the travel bans came, it didn't stop us from the sport relationship. So we have a model, we created a Baskervillian model of friendship. So today, we are arguing that we have many Baskervilles, quote unquote, in America. You are one, your son is one, sports people, I'm one. So we have thousands of Baskervilles in Iran and in America. And our challenge is to connect these Baskervilles together through bridges. With a bridge of art, bridge of sports, bridges of cinema, bridges of culture, and maintain American-Iranian friendship, to strengthen the bonds of friendship between American and Iranian peoples. Even though we have conflict, we should not lose sight of what keeps us together.
Sure.
And that is the message. That is the message that I have all the time, wherever I go, that we Iranians are proud when we hear an Iranian has been appointed to a position.
Sure.
I mean, just today, for your audience today, Dr. Ali Nouri, former president of the American Federation of Scientists, became an assistant secretary of energy for US.
Wow.
And we just got that news from his office because we've been in touch. And the office told me that he just got appointed and he's going to be announced. So we immediately announced it to our community. We put it on a Facebook. He put a message up saying he's proud of it. He would like to make the Iranians and Americans proud of his position. So we're going to promote successes.
That's okay.
I think that is my phone.
I'm
sorry.
It's okay.
So we are going to promote successes of Iranian Americans who, through their expertise, through their hard work, become important civil servants for the country. And here we don't expect them to kind of represent the nationality of Iranians.
No.
we are expecting to represent Americans and Iranians.
Of course, yeah.
So by cultivating this type of thing, I think as a Baskerville Institute, what we are going to do, we're going to have a lot of conversations. We had a conversation with Ambassador John Limbert. And John Limbert told us about his experience. We are having a conversation next week with an Israeli scholar of Iran, David Menasheri. And David Menasheri is going to speak about how did Iran and Israel go from close friendship to bitter enemies. And through that conversation, he's going to talk about the Iranians in Israel. There are 300,000 Iranians in Israel today.
Yeah, there's a big number. I watched the US-Iran conversation last week with the ambassador. I'll be obviously watching each one of these conversations and promoting it where I can. So I think you're getting to one of my questions, which is, which is similar to what I was doing with the Iranian Trade Association. I was in a non-political way, even though of course I'm interested observer in politics. In a non-political way, how do you build bridges? And my focus was entrepreneurship, trade development, really just objective information, not subjective, not partisan. It's just objective information, statistics, kind of boring stuff, providing trade information because nobody was doing it. But when you have sanctions, there's no U.S. Department of Commerce support. Like you said, in your case, there was no embassy. So when you have no relationships, all of these basic infrastructure of communication doesn't exist. And my paving work was based in trade and business because I had set up the World Trade Center here in San Diego. So that's how I got into it, as I'm interested in trade and always just had a great passion for international trade. But for me, 9/11 changed the civic discourse, of that, and I had to kind of take a step back. And then the rhetoric over here spun out of control, axis of evil, and all the sanctions, But while we were doing this between 1997 and 2001, we made a dent. And Madeleine Albright, others announced openings in the humanitarian trade sanctions that you recall, rugs, pistachios, which was something in my talking track when I was in Washington every month, and medicines and foods and that kind of stuff coming and going. But of course, I think Trump did a lot of damage with that. And I hope with the return to the Iran deal and some of the other things, it kind of widens the road. While they're having political discussions, important political discussions and disagreements, then other folks, whether it's trade or wrestling or culture, they can pave the road. So when it's time, these conversations at the higher level can take place. So I think that kind of gets us to where the Institute is now. You mentioned how the US-Iran wrestling thing, which is really amazing story, just coincidentally. I mean, what if someone hadn't found you in Cairo? Some of these domino effects didn't happen, but it did. And you see kind of how your mission is now. I think you described that your mission is obviously to promote these conversations with luminaries of our time. And so one of the pet peeves I have is, although we have a lot of in this conversation, which is a complex conversation, we have a lot of knowledge that is historical. I always want to bring, and I think a lot of folks that live here want to bring to light, I think, as you mentioned, Dr. Nouri and others, what the younger generation is doing. Right? I mean, like right now on social media, these kids on TikTok, they post this challenge, whatever it's called. Here's what people think Iran looks like, and they show the stereotypical images, and then here's what Iran really is like. And they show these modern cities, modern people, obviously superbly, I think it's okay to brag, Iranians anywhere in the US, abroad, some of the most advanced engineering, science, medicine, technology entrepreneurs. I mean, if you take out Iranians out of Silicon Valley, I think the whole social network system would collapse.
Oh, of course.
From eBay to Google to, I mean, it's just crazy how advanced that community is. And I would suggest maybe for one of your future conversations, and I have some friends in Silicon Valley, if you wish, In fact, one of them, Suzanne Akbarpour, started Silicon Iran.
Mm-hmm.
She did a magazine, Silicon Iran it was called, Suzanne Akbarpour, and just a tremendously successful tech entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. And there's several of them that have company startups, dozens and dozens of company startups. So I think technology and that integration better speaks to the generations that we hope, right, that we want to engage, and I'm happy to help, of course, with that.
Let me also kind of because those conversations are critical, but at the Baskerville Institute, we have also kind of established a model of logistics and outreach that if you look at the board members we have on the Baskerville Institute, it shows that exactly the parallel track that we are looking at, we want to have impact.
Sure.
We want to have impact. And then the second thing we want to do, we want to have a metrics for measuring that impact. So if you look at our board today, we have former ambassadors who are speaking fluent Persian or Russian. We have the president of the World Trade Center in Utah, Miles Hansen. Miles also speaks Persian. He has been in Tajikistan. He was a consul in Tajikistan.
Wow.
And Miles Hansen, who came here, he's the CEO of the World Trade Center. He's on our board. We also have the head of the Salt Lake City Development Office, Ben Colander. Ben Colander also, a former vet, served in Afghanistan. They speak Persian. They love Persian culture. And he's ended up in the mayor's office. So he's on our board.
Wow, fantastic.
So then we have a city council member, Iranian, Shirin Ghorbani.
Yeah.
So what we are doing here is that as much as we talk about those big macro issues,
Sure.
we continuously keep it going from national, international, local.
Sure.
And our local dimension is very important to us because in Utah, we have the oldest educational connections with Iran established in 1915.
Wow.
1915 was the time a Persian consul from Washington came to Utah and gave the commencement address for the Utah State University in 1915.
Wow.
The first Iranian student from Iran came to Utah in 1923. So we have connections that friendship, education, business, relationship. Also, we also have one of the richest Iranian Americans in Utah, Khosrow Semnani.
Wow. Some San Diegans may argue with that, but it's possible. I don't doubt it. There's some tech entrepreneurs here too.
Yeah, state of Utah. So what we are doing then, I want to go back again to that element that you mentioned about the Silicon Valley is so important. It is important to kind of find a role, a bridge for these people that otherwise, when they're in their own expertise, they don't have this opportunity.
Sure.
Because they're so technical, they're so involved in what they're doing, they don't have an opportunity for a bridge to come on board and talk about their experiences of how their idea of citizenship changed by this job they have, how they see their expertise connecting. So we are very interested in building those bridges, particularly among expert groups that do not have a dialogue bridge.
Yes.
So we want to facilitate the bridge among expert groups, like between doctors, Iranian doctors. There is an Iranian American Medical Association in New Jersey.
Sure.
But how many of our local doctors really know about that?
Yeah.
So we are ready. We want to do this. We are going to have a session on health diplomacy.
Oh, very nice.
And the health diplomacy, we're going to bring a pharmacologist from Iran, a doctor from Iran, and a doctor from here. They're going to talk about the history of vaccine diplomacy. They're going to talk about how doctors went abroad, regardless of nationality and all that. So on the medicine, we have that bridge. We have a sport bridge. We are going to restart the wrestling exchanges, hopefully next year again. And we're looking to see whether we can bring the volleyball team.
Mm.
And Tokyo Olympics probably is going to be a lot virtual.
Yeah.
We are trying to see whether we could use the Baskerville Institute's platform to broadcast some of their matches.
Wow.
Some of the matches between, because Iranian wrestlers are going there. So we are looking for all kind of bridge building opportunities.
Yeah.
And we would love to connect to people of expertise who could help later on.
Sure. Sure.
So in that sense, I think one of the good missions that all of us can pursue is help putting those people on the bridge together.
Sure. Sure. No, I think that sounds great. I'm so excited to hear about all those plans, and I'm happy, like I've always said, to help in any manner I can. Usually, what reason a lot of people come to me is connections. After 25 years in government and all the things I've done, I've often acted as a connection broker, just because I like.
That's a good way of putting it. Connection.
Yeah, I like connecting people, and of course, I just can't. Just like yourself, I'm addicted to some form of community public service in whatever shape, way, or form it takes, right? So in this case, obviously, very passionate about some kind of Iranian-American bridge building. I don't care how it comes. The last 4 years were very frustrating, but I hope the next 4 years will be where the bridge builders like us stay very busy in trying to help the conversation. So I think you identified really where this institute started, where you started, where it's going, where the opportunities are. What do you see the biggest challenges ahead? And ultimately, what does success look like?
Okay. So the challenges are that we are operating geographically from United States, and we are promoting friendship with people, nationalities that their home countries, if you look at it, are 6,000 miles away. Iran, United States. So in promoting friendship, in promoting the strengthening of bonds of friendship between Iranian Americans, American Iranians within US and abroad, there are challenges. There are challenges of course, sanctions, financial sanctions, banking, and so forth, that kind of make us pay extra attention to how we go about do our work. We have to be very careful in terms of not get caught up in any kind of legal entanglement, not get caught up in any kind of political entanglement that kind of will undermine the broader picture. So one of the biggest challenges we have is really finding and navigating through these legal, financial, logistical challenges. And for that, we of course need help from our American Iranians and Iranian Americans who have different expertise, whether they're lawyers, they're accountants, financial structures, donors. And so that's the challenge that I see, that every time rhetorics go down between Iran and the United States, these challenges don't go down.
Yeah.
I mean, there could be less rhetoric today, but Wells Fargo, if they see we release some money for the Iranian wrestling team, they're going to freeze our account.
Sure.
So our challenges really is to how, through civic engagement, we also get our businesses, banks, people who work in this institute, also understand what we are doing. Also understand, because kind of we need to now kind of deflate, depoliticize, entanglize, escalate. And so that takes a lot of time.
Sure.
It takes a lot of time. So it is very nice to have conversations, very nice to have the good, optimistic pictures. But I would say our work is divided into two parts: preparations and structuring and logistics, which is very time consuming, takes patience, and also the pleasure of listening to each other. and also seeing the success of your work.
Sure. You mentioned donors. Do you see, how is it I assume it's a nonprofit?
Yes.
501c3?
Yes.
So it relies on donation sponsorships from private
private, and we are not accepting any public money.
Okay.
There's a Sterling Foundation here. It's a family foundation. They support us on the friendship.
Okay.
The Sterling family is very interested in this thing, our American family.
Mhm.
M90 Family Foundation has given us money to kind of promote the educational exchanges pre-revolution.
Mhm.
So we're doing a book on Samuel Jordan and Alvord College.
Mhm.
So we get donations, we get support. We also have sports sponsors
Sure.
that every time we are trying to go together, they will create the structure for us, like we have in California,
Mhm.
with USA Wrestling. So they contribute to USA Wrestling.
Mhm.
USA Wrestling will help with us. We work together.
Mhm.
In that sense, we go on. So we have kind of 4 or 5 different levels of support and sponsorship.
Good, because that's usually one of the biggest challenges for any new nonprofit is to stay funded past next year.
Yes.
But it sounds like you have multiple layers, which are well legitimate and institutionalized
Yes.
foundations that have their own programs, but they also support your very kind of focused efforts.
So they already have their own programs, they already have their own initiatives, but then they look at us and they see that if they want to branch into something on Iran,
Yeah.
we have the experience.
Yeah.
We have the experience, we bring the connections together. We also understand the whole logistics that I talked about.
Yeah.
We understand the sanctions, OFAC licenses. So kind of 2 years ago, we applied for OFAC licenses for wrestling,
Mhm.
for Semnani Family Foundation.
Mhm.
Because Semnani Family Foundation was giving us money, and then they were getting contacted from their bank saying, why are you giving money? So then we helped them. We applied for OFAC license. They got the OFAC license, and the banks never asked that question anymore.
Wow.
So we are prepared if there is a sponsor that comes forward
Yeah.
and says to you, we want to do something with Iran, and we do have a model. We tell them, here it is. We can help you with OFAC. We can help you with logistics and connections. So that kind of things, I think our institute, because of the experience with sports and all that,
Mhm.
we are better able to kind of connect the civic groups of Iranians if they are interested,
Mhm.
and then guide them through the narrow ways of the American politics and American political system.
Sure.
I think that's the challenge. The challenge is that there are a lot of good people, there are a lot of good, willing people who want to do things, but yet they get alienated, they get disappointed by the problems, and they don't go forward.
Sure.
So we want to encourage that. We want to encourage it that you have to kind of go with the system, you have to accept the system.
Mhm.
And if from Iran we have a partner, we are very straightforward with them.
Mhm.
We cannot provide compensation to you.
Yeah.
But we're not going to reject your virtual engagement.
Sure.
So in a way, the challenge is to maintain that relationship that we talked about.
Yeah.
Now, thank God for webinar and these things, and yet continuously work toward making it grassroots. So hopefully when things become normalized, let's hopefully 10 years from now, then you do have all the necessary structures.
Sure.
The city hall, in the state and local government, in the national government.
Sure.
And then by then, I think normalization, if I could use that word, we need to normalize our civic engagements.
Yeah.
We need to normalize a civic engagement in a way that it fits parallel to development.
I want to try to wrap up, but I do want to say, as I'm listening, and of course, I've lived this conversation for a long time, been on the front lines of this conversation. I was invited to the UN when Khatami came to New York. I was invited to various other forums in LA with other Iranian Americans, listening to Iranian dignitaries speak. And looking at really what does it take. This may take another conversation or just to resolve, but what does it take to break through. Because we could have all of these groundbreaking, and then the political realities of the world that we live in simply don't provide for a solution in the time frame that we hope. I mean, look at Cuba. If you look at Cuba, most diplomats will tell you it wasn't just the Cuban government; it was the Cuban Americans in Florida that stood in the way of engagement, and Obama broke through that, and suffered whatever he suffered, but he had to face that. And even other people that ran astray of the Cuban engagement was Al Gore during the Bush-Gore, as you recall, election, and Elian, and that Cuban child that fled, and that created a big Cuban American opposition to Gore's.
Yes.
So here we are in 2021, and like I said in the beginning, Iranian Americans, many intensely supportive of Trump, thinking, and I think I'm going to say what you already know, thinking that that Trump was going to be hard on Iran, and Republicans are somehow sentimentally connected to the monarchy and that Republican ideology, and if they support Trump, somehow there will be an accountability with the Iranian government, and they will prevail. I mean, I'm just going to say, I'm sorry to say, pretty ludicrous logic from a political standpoint. Nonetheless, they firmly believed that, and they still do.
They still do.
They may not wear Viking hats and storm the Capitol, but they're very passionate about that. So I guess what I'm saying is, in any engagement that we hope to pave the way for, there needs to be, in my opinion, some form of internal reconciliation with the Iranian American community.
Yes, there.
And I don't know how to fix that, because that may take a dozen different institutes to deal with that, because they're so intensely entrenched in their thinking. But I'm just putting it out there, and I wanted to see your opinion.
I would kind of recommend not looking at the issue in terms of the prescriptive matter of a diagnostic, that it takes a certain medicine, and if we all come together and agree on the makeup on that medicine and we all eat it, we all get better. Yeah. I would not look at the American-Iranian relationship in engineering technical matter like that. I will recommend that differences that we have will remain, yet we have to come to a realization that either we promote our interests and our views as citizens of the United States, or are we going to promote our views as nationalities of those countries? So as a US citizen, if you think about it as a citizen, there is nothing wrong with promoting democracy and human rights in Iran.
Sure.
We should not stay indifferent to human rights violations.
Sure.
We should not turn a blind eye if the Baha'is of Iran are mistreated. No, we should speak up about that. And we should not turn a blind eye if an academic is arrested in Iran for doing research. No, we should speak up on that. The question is that we need to speak up as a voice of a US citizen, as a citizen engaged in influencing the policy of a country. We should not get engaged into creating a conflict between the countries.
Yeah.
Because it is understandable that we have family in Iran, they're all suffering in Iran, sanctions is hurting it, and the regime is responsible. Yes, who will deny that?
Sure, sure.
It is a fact that there is corruption in Iran.
Sure.
Yet, if we come together and see that the best way to promote democracy in Iran is not through military engagement.
Sure.
It's not through military. The best way to promote democracy in Iran is to write to our congressmen, get our representatives, and tell them to put more money in promotion of democracy, in giving more internet access to civil society in Iran, in removing the restrictions on virtual exchanges with Iranian people.
Sure.
So once we come up with a modeling of promoting our ideas better, I think then we can create space for each other.
Yeah.
So, but the space has to be acknowledged by the fact that we are a civic engagement space. We have to accept the civic. What is to be civic to each other?
Yeah.
Now, there's some that will not accept that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then they can always have their own platform, but then for those who accept it and they don't know how to do it, there will be definitely room. And there's a large portion of people who are really do not know which way to go, and they need to be kind of enlightened. So I think the energy, I would say, we should spend our energy on positive change.
Sure. You know, that takes a lot of patience. It takes patience because a lot of my people around me look at how long I've been committed. People like us have been committed to that positive energy. And they say, aren't you disheartened? Aren't you discouraged? I go, yes, I'm human. I get discouraged. I get set back. But that doesn't mean, you should stop the conversation. And I think it goes back to developing the fundamental, things. Sometimes, when we practice soccer, we spend 45 minutes just running and breathing and knowing how to stand before we play. In many ways, to me, civic engagement is having, going back to the earlier point about having the maturity to be able to disagree with someone with respect. And that takes practice. That takes running. That takes breathing. That takes knowing how to stand without making everything about what happens in this country now and what unfortunately happens in Iran and elsewhere around the world, the politics of outrage. That you can only get elected, you can only make your point by being outraged. And that, I think, the bridge building, of course, we should, like you say, we should do it. But from a fundamental basis, it takes practice to even be qualified to step on the field to play soccer or football. You practice, you run, you breathe, you know how to stand, you know how to defend yourself, you know how to advance. And that takes practice, that takes civic engagement. And for people to kind of step back and instead of charging up a hill and raising their fist, learning how to engage with someone in a civil, respectful way. You just heard President Biden say it a minute ago on telling his own people, if I hear you talk down to anyone, if I hear you disrespect, I'm going to fire you on the spot. That's the tone he's setting, which is so refreshing. And I think that's the tone we need as a culture, worldwide maybe, but at least in our little corner of the world, to respect each other's opinions. We're still Iranian. Fundamentally, we all still want the same thing.
Yes. And also remember that everything will calm down if the states in conflict with each other begin to reconcile. Look at today, Israel, United Arab Emirates, normalized relations, right? The former Arab enemies, right? They were former enemies.
Sure.
But once they normalize relations, it doesn't mean the mindset is gone, but yet the tension went down.
Sure.
The tension. So here, I think part of the impact is that we were hoping with our sport diplomacy, kind of with the State Department engaged, we were hoping to kind of let it loose a kind of a normalization pattern that maybe through that they could start talking about big issues. But yet we all aware of it that as we did all that investment, we did all that work, and suddenly Trump came to power, and you could sit back and say 10 years of all that were just went done. No. But today, you look at back that dynamics of American politics always allows for civic engagement. And today, our Trumpist friends have to really think about how they can promote their ideas. If they want democracy in Iran, if they want a referendum in Iran, if they want religion and politics to be separated in Iran, if they want minorities to be recognized in Iran, they need to start thinking in a more constructive way, okay, how do I go about propose that?
Yeah.
You can write a column op-ed in the LA Times.
Yeah.
You could write letters, you could put meetings together.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the path is for us to not ignore the other side.
Absolutely, yeah.
The path is that we need to acknowledge the issues that they're dealing with, and yet not acknowledge the fact that it has to end in conflict and outrage.
Yeah.
So if
that's our American heritage talking, because that's not an Iranian trait.
That's not an Iranian trait.
That's 40, 50 years of living in this country and talking about respecting civic discourse and civic engagement. Those are American traits. And I always tell people that's what I've learned. I've never been more proud to be a child of two cultures, because I've taken the best out of both and I'm trying to bring them together. People like us, and like you say, there's many people like us in different seats. Now, again, through circumstance, a clear majority of Americans have rejected the politics of hate and outrage of the previous administration. Yes. And they have set this country on course for world engagement, from the Paris Accord to getting back into the World Health Organization to all those 17 executive orders that President Biden signed yesterday, and I hope getting back into the Iran deal. So yes. As imperfect as American democracy was, and at momentary time it felt like it was on the verge of collapse, it never really was. It was always still what was Churchill called it, the least perfect or the most imperfect one that we have. So
yes,
it works. It worked, and I hope it will set us on a course of engagement over the next 4 years and whatever we can do. So I won't take more of your time. If you have any final thoughts,
No, thank you very much, and I really I'm glad that you started this project, and I think I'd like to encourage you to continue doing this, but also maybe bring together a couple of people all the time, and kind of that they can agree on the issues at hand, and yet they can offer a path forward. So I think that's a great approach, and I think more and more, one thing we are doing right now, every article that we are writing is one Iranian, one American.
Oh, very nice.
All the op-eds that we just wrote, that op-ed in LA Times, it was an Iranian American. Mm-hmm. So everything we're going to do is going to be in one Iranian, one American. All our sessions, if you notice, is moderated by me and an American.
I see.
So I think this model of jointly moderating, jointly conducting, it will give a good example to our younger generations. And frequently, as Iranian, we are very much individual, very much patriarchal.
Sure.
So we want to encourage that. So I'm really pleased to be your first guest, and I hope we could devote one session later on just to sport diplomacy.
Oh, absolutely. I will be trying to do these sessions once a week if I have time. But that's a very good advice on creating kind of different perspectives. I was actually, like we discussed, I was going to focus on even bringing in opposition voices, so I can understand not American opposition, Republicans or Democrats or Green parties, different folks, different voices, because there's still a voice.
Yes.
74 million people thought Trump would be the best thing for their life and this country. And that is just the biggest number out of 2020, I think. As much as coronavirus was absolute national tragedy, 74 million Americans thought that they're on the right track with Trump. And that's something this country has to reconcile with.
Yes.
And us as a community, as citizens of this country, within our area, we have to reconcile that conversation.
Yes.